We have a deeply ingrained cultural assumption about money. Raw genius inevitably builds billion-dollar empires. If you have a massive intellect, the logic goes, you will naturally amass massive wealth. To see if that assumption holds up, economists looked at the NLSY 79, a landmark dataset tracking lives, test scores, and bank accounts of thousands of American baby boomers over several decades. This chart shows exactly what you'd expect. As a person's IQ score increases along the bottom axis, their annual salary climbs right along with it. Every single point increase in IQ reliably translates to hundreds of extra dollars in yearly pay. This happens because high cognitive ability is highly valued in the labor market. That line represents income, the transactional, day-to-day money generated directly by a person's labor. Because society routinely rewards cognitive processing power with large, steady paychecks, we are constantly shown evidence that smart people make good money. But watch what happens to this chart when we plot that exact same group's total accumulated wealth. The data scatters randomly into a flat line. The statistical correlation between an individual's IQ and their actual net worth drops to a negligible 2.4%. Wealth is completely separate from the income flowing in. Wealth is the cumulative stock of your assets minus your liabilities. It is the stagnant pool of resources you actually manage to hold on to. Data shows highly intelligent people max out credit cards and declare bankruptcy at rates equal to, and sometimes higher than, individuals with average test scores. This creates a cognitive accumulation paradox. Income is what you make, and wealth is what you keep. Statistically, the smartest people are terrible at keeping it. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the psychological traps of high intelligence, starting with complexity bias. A high IQ provides the capacity to understand exotic financial products. This analytical capacity often breeds overconfidence. Brilliant minds routinely over-leverage themselves in complex debt structures and speculative systems, ignoring boring, proven wealth-building fundamentals. They build highly sophisticated financial engines that frequently collapse under their own weight. The second trap is analysis paralysis. Highly intelligent people usually spend their formative years in rigid academic environments where they are severely penalized for making mistakes. That academic perfectionism translates poorly to real-world investing. Smart people sit on the sidelines for years, waiting for perfect market conditions and flawless data. Meanwhile, average investors simply buy good enough assets and let time do the work. In a very real way, their own intelligence generates highly sophisticated excuses to avoid taking any simple, effective financial action. There is also a deep biological toll to high intelligence. Neurobiologists sometimes refer to the gifted individual as a sentinel, a high-fidelity biological system that correlates with sensory hypersensitivity, hyperawareness, and significantly higher rates of anxiety. This heightened awareness makes them susceptible to what researchers call predictive moral injury. This is the psychological trauma a highly sensitive person experiences when they constantly perceive the ethical and systemic flaws in their environment long before anyone else. When they are trapped in deeply flawed corporate or institutional systems, that constant cognitive dissonance inevitably leads to severe burnout. It causes many brilliant individuals to willingly step off the high-income treadmill entirely. And when they are subjected to extreme market stress, the results are often disastrous. High IQ investors make deeply emotional financial decisions, like panic selling at the bottom of a crash. But they use their massive intellects to disguise and justify those errors as highly rational choices. Raw cognitive processing power is surprisingly fragile under stress. This makes high IQ individuals uniquely vulnerable to emotional traps that actively destroy their accumulated wealth. The missing variable that actually solves this paradox is emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize and regulate one's own psychological responses. When researchers feed the data back into their models, combining cognitive capacity with high emotional self-regulation, the correlation suddenly shifts. That combination massively and reliably predicts high net worth. Psychologists map this out using the complementary capabilities model, which tracks how the human brain completely changes the way it processes financial decisions as we age. This chart illustrates the two pathways of decision-making over a lifespan. Fluid intelligence, our raw processing speed and working memory, drops sharply after age 30, but crystallized intelligence, our accumulated knowledge and expertise, steadily climbs. This accumulation of domain-specific knowledge eventually overtakes the decline in raw mental speed. The result is a high financial quotient, allowing older generations to make mathematically superior financial decisions simply by relying on their lived experience. Long-term wealth accumulation relies entirely on this behavioral wisdom. It has very little to do with raw mental speed or processing power. Building wealth is not a complex math problem waiting to be solved. It is a behavioral framework that has to be actively practiced. The core pillars of financial independence, accepting good enough investments, controlling panic during a downturn, and committing to boring, repeatable fundamentals, do not require a genius-level intellect. To actually help people achieve financial stability, society needs to shift away from teaching rote financial formulas and focus entirely on cultivating emotional self-regulation and healthy risk tolerance. You don't need a 140 IQ to become rich. The wealthy don't necessarily have better brains. They simply possess better behavioral psychology.